Greetings, my wonderful students, and welcome to this review of the Middle Ages, Part 1. Now, after the fall of Rome, there was chaos in Europe, and many different kingdoms arose from the ashes, ruled by the very barbarians that destroyed the empire. Feudalism developed. Now, feudalism is a decentralized form of government, where power is spread out amongst many different groups of people, with the king at the top, barons, knights, and of course villeins. Now the king gives land to the nobles, the barons, or the dukes, or the thanes, in exchange for military service. The nobles give land to other nobles, or knights, in exchange for military service. King John of England was a ruler who kept raising taxes on his nobles and abusing his power. He was even suspected of murdering his own nephew. His nobles rebelled against him and won. And after they won, they forced him to sign a document called the Magna Carta, the Great Charter of Rights guaranteed to the British people. Now, the Magna Carta formed a great council made up of the nobles, and the king had to get permission from this council to raise taxes. The king's power was limited in other ways as well, stating that he could not take bribes, that he had to treat people the same, the nobles the same, not the same as the peasants. Parliament eventually evolved from the Great Council. Now, in the eastern half, the Byzantine Empire had been the eastern half of the Roman Empire, and it survived for another 1,000 years after the fall of Rome. It helped preserve much of Western civilization after the collapse of Rome. Like the Islamic civilization had preserved the teachings of the Greeks and the Romans, and Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, so too did the Byzantines do the same. Now, a famous Byzantine emperor was Justinian. Justinian is famous for Justinian's Code, in which he ordered all Roman law to be collected and organized. This forms the basis of modern Western law today. Also under his reign, the Hagia Sophia was built, a large Christian cathedral. Now, the Byzantine economy was strong due to its location along major trade routes. You can see here, it's in the eastern half of the Mediterranean. As we stated before, for the Roman Empire and for the ancient Greeks, trade along the Mediterranean Sea was key for their economies. And the location of Constantinople was especially key, because it's located here along the Bosporus and Dardanelles Straits, which allow passage from the Mediterranean Sea into the Black Sea. From the Black Sea, you can trade with all of Eastern Europe. So you add that to the fact that the Silk Road ended in this vicinity, and you can understand why these trade routes were so powerful. Now, Kievan Rus was located in the modern-day Ukraine, north of the Black Sea. So as a result, trade with the Byzantines, because of their control of this region, brought cultural diffusion, baby, with Kievan Rus. Today, two monks, Methodius and Cyril, brought Eastern Orthodox Christianity to Kievan Rus, converting them to Christianity. And the monks also created an alphabet for them that is still used today, the Cyrillic alphabet, as you can see here. It's very confusing to us in our Latin alphabet. Eventually, Kievan Rus fell to the Mongol invasions, and this cut the Russians, as they're now called, off from the rest of Europe and changed the way they developed culturally. Turkish Muslims took control of the Holy Land in Asia Minor, which had been part of the Byzantine Empire. They did this in the 1000s. So the Byzantine emperor, because his empire was being threatened, asked the Pope for help. And he also mentioned the persecution that the Muslim Turks were doing against Christians in the Holy Land. So the Pope called for a crusade, a holy war, to regain the Holy Land for Christians and to defeat the Muslims. Well, the Crusades eventually failed. As a matter of fact, sometimes they're called history's most successful failures. Because even though the Crusades failed, the Europeans gained much. Trade between Europe and the Middle East grew again. This restarts those Mediterranean trade routes for Western Europe. And they were reintroduced to the learnings of the Romans and the Greeks, which had been preserved by both the Muslims and by the Byzantines. This would help lead to the Renaissance, and the desire for better trade routes would lead to the Age of Exploration. Eventually, the Ottoman Turks took control of Constantinople itself in 1453. This ended the Byzantine Empire and began the Ottoman Empire. And then as a result of the Ottomans beginning to raise taxes quite high on Christian merchants going through here, it kickstarts the age of exploration to try to find a way around these Mediterranean trade routes. And the Ottomans changed the name of Constantinople to Istanbul. And I hope you enjoyed this review.